Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So in this video we will be creating a very huge celebrity family mansion on a 64 by 64 lot in the world of Brindleton Bay, which actually came with the Cats and Dogs expansion pack. And I've honestly been meaning to create another one of these like huge mansions in this lot for a while now, so I finally came around to like creating it. And since we recently hit 2,000 subscribers on the channel, I just really want to show my appreciation by creating a very huge mansion for you guys. And also, thank you very much for every single person who has actually supported me to reach that milestone. I really do appreciate it. And I really hope that you guys do actually end up enjoying and watching this video and also playing with this build in your game. And I do apologize for the inconsistent uploads over the past week, mainly because I was just trying to focus on creating this build and getting it out the way, especially because we were reaching that milestone. I really wanted to have something prepared for you guys, and this was like the main huge mansion that I had in mind before even hitting the milestone that I wanted to sort of create if we did. So yeah, I really do appreciate if you guys do let me know what you guys think about this build in the comment sections below. But yeah, this house was actually a former famous celebrity basketball player's home, but then it also got bought by a different family, and then there was just like a bunch of different renovations and changes made to the house, which you guys would see portrayed throughout the entire video as I'm building this build as well, because I was sort of initially planning to build this as a family sort of house and mansion. So we do also incorporate a lot of like child safety stuff and a lot of like these children's bedrooms and nurseries and whatnot, which you guys would see later on in the video. But yeah, so far we pretty much have the entire sort of like shell of the home completely finished, and I didn't want to bore you guys, so I did actually end up skipping most of the roofing, mainly because it was just very complex. And as you guys saw like previously, like a few seconds ago, there was just like a lot of detail and attention that has gone into creating this roofing. And I just had to use like a lot of these like wedged sort of roofing pieces that sort of like all matched all together, and especially working on those diagonal walls, it just takes quite a lot of time to sort of create or like replicate that sort of roof design, which I actually really enjoyed doing, because I don't really do these kind of roof designs in general where there's like a big sort of like spacing or like platform in the center of the roof, which I thought actually turned out really interesting. And we do actually add a lot of detailing up there and a lot of like ventilation and solar panel units and whatnot, which you guys would see later on in the video. But yeah, I'm really happy with how that actually turned out, and it actually looks pretty similar to like what you would see in real life, which I feel like made the build look a lot more realistic than it really is. And this house also has 3 different like parts of the back garden, which I feel like half of this house is mainly the back garden, which I really actually enjoyed building because it was just such a unique sort of garden to recreate. And yeah, I just feel like it turned out really well and it complemented the entire house pretty well overall. And I just really like the sort of like diagonal shape that we have going on for like the front entrance of this home, which I feel like really does catch the attention and the eye of like the viewer, especially because it's just like quite unique in my opinion to have sort of like the front or like main entrance of the area be on a diagonal, and especially like on the side of the house rather than it being like in the center of the home. And we also have like this very nice catwalk sort of like pavement that goes throughout like the entire home, which sort of like connects all together, and I just really love the way that looked. And we also created our own custom sort of like archways and sort of like entrances to either part of the house by using these like archways that came from the Love Struck expansion pack. And I also used some very nice sort of like marble columns that went on either side of them, which made it look very grand, and it just looked really nice overall. And I just felt like it looked really custom as well, because you just had to like place a lot of stuff together. And if I had to describe this home, I feel like it was like a mix of like traditional and also like a modern sort of mixture in terms of like the furniture as well as like for the exterior, which you would see like throughout the entire build. We have a lot of wooden textures and frames for the windows, but we also have a lot of modern furniture pieces going throughout the entire home, which I feel like tied in really well, and it kind of made sense for a huge mansion like this. And we also utilize a lot of the Greenhouse Haven glass windows which came from that kit, because I just really love the way they look and it just fit perfectly well with this build that I was trying to like go for. So I really wanted these like very nice sort of detailed sort of windows that we had going on throughout the entire build, and I just feel like I was able to do that with the glass windows that came from that kit. And here you can see me actually create one of those arches, which I actually copied and pasted throughout the entire back garden area, which I really loved doing. It's sort of just like placing an arch and then placing another arch on top of it, but then turning it upside down with the tool mod and sort of like lowering it and making it sort of like seem like it's taller than it really is. And I believe your Sims can just use that without having any issues. So yeah, I just feel like it's a really unique way of creating really tall arches, because unfortunately those arches don't really come in a taller wall height, so I sort of had to get creative with that. And for the front of the home, I actually used quite a lot of the pristine pedestals that came from the Get Famous expansion pack, just to make some nice custom sort of like fencing or like detailing, which houses some of the plants that you would see at the front of the home. And I actually really enjoyed creating this front home on the diagonal, mainly because I don't really create houses or design a lot of stuff on diagonals, mainly because I just feel like it does warp a lot of the textures or like the windows or the doors in ways that I don't really want it to be. But unfortunately for this build, in order for it to be as realistic as possible to the real home, I kind of had to sort of like work on that diagonal, which I actually really enjoyed doing. And we do actually change a lot of the stuff that we have going on for the back garden here, especially on the balcony. So we utilize a eco lifestyle sort of sliding door, but eventually we do get rid of that and change it to the Greenhouse Haven one, mainly because I just wanted it to be all from the same pack, or at least similar to it. And I didn't want something to stand out that it was too modern, because I was kind of going for that traditional but also modern theme at the same time, if that makes sense. And we do also have like this sort of garage sort of entrance way off to the side of the home, which I actually really like, but obviously we don't really have any functional cars. So instead I actually renovated and used that as some sort of like tool shed place, as well as like a small like simple gym, which is also completely functional, rather than leaving it blank and like adding fake cars into it, which would sort of like waste space, if that makes sense. And we also have like these very nice curved details that sort of like poke out from each side of the garden area, which sort of is like these like small little hangout sort of seating area spaces, which I actually really like. And we also have this very nice sort of outdoor sort of seating area, which is covered by this, I'm not sure what it's called, maybe like a pergola, but it has like these sheer sort of curtain things that cover it, which I feel like looked really nice. And I believe those came from the Island Living expansion pack. And I think I pulled that out of the debug mode, so you would initially find it from there, I think. And we also have like a very nice sort of central unit area of this garden, which houses the sort of swimming pool area, and it was on a different like platform level in comparison to the other levels of the garden, which I feel like looked really interesting. And I really wanted some sort of like central sort of monument piece for this like sort of back area for the swimming pool. And I came up with the idea of creating this, or placing this sort of roof end sort of object on this side of the swimming pool, which I feel like turned out really good, because initially I believe you used those sort of sculpture pieces on towards like the end of like peaked roofs on like the tall part of like a roof, if that makes sense. But instead I just wanted to sort of like get creative and just use it as like the end piece of the swimming pool, which I feel like turned out really great. And we also have a lot of these like small planters here and there that I created using the sort of like short wall heights, and I just feel like it turned out really well. And I just added some like small little like trees in there that I sized down, and we will also add some small little like moss ball sort of like greenery textured plants off to the side of some of the columns, which I feel like turned out really good. And here I'm just like sort of taking out some of the objects that I thought would look really good and like work well with this entire build, and I just sort of like left them there. And eventually we do actually use most of them. But yeah, we also utilized a lot of this iron railing throughout the entire home, which I feel like looked really nice, and it just made a lot of sense to like sort of cover that swimming pool area, which I feel like one of the family owners who actually lived in this house previously sort of created that for like some sort of like safety gate for their children, which I feel like was a really good idea, especially for a very huge and extravagant modern family home like this. And we also have another one of those like sort of curved sort of seating areas, which I really do love doing, actually, to be honest. I actually really liked how it turned out for this build, mainly because it sort of just like used up the area. And we also have this sort of like pergola sort of situation that is like on a really tall platform, and it's sort of like leveled up with this sort of grass area that we have going on here. And I just really liked how this area in particular turned out, because we just like added a lot of like sort of outdoor seating area, a bar, as well as like a nice like barbecue area, which I feel like turned out so nice. And I just feel like it really made a lot of sense for a very nice like huge family home. And I also went around the entire area of like the platforms and flooring and just added a bunch of this like flat sort of white fencing thing, which I believe your Sims can walk over completely fine, they wouldn't have any issues. But I just really liked how it made the edges of every single like platform or like floor look really clean and flush, rather than leaving it with like that default black or like gray sort of outline that it has around the edges, which I don't really like. And it felt a bit more fitting to sort of like add that extra detail here and there, which I feel like really did tie in the entire home overall. And I also placed a lot of these greeneries and shrubs, and especially a lot of plants throughout the entire build, whether it was in the exterior or the interior, because I just feel like it really was really fitting for this build. And we actually created some sort of like custom fence sort of situation towards the backside of this sort of like basketball area, where I placed this like flat white sort of fencing, but then I also placed some black iron sort of fencing debug object on top of the white fencing, just to make it seem like it was a bit more like taller, and as if it was like sort of protecting a bit more than it really was, if that made sense. And I also covered the entire perimeter of this home with a lot of these like green shrubs, which I feel like makes sense for a huge home like this, to just cover it up as much as possible rather than leaving it looking as clean as possible, if that makes sense, because I just feel like it would just like be lived in, and a lot of like plants and greenery would like grow throughout the entire area of this home. And we have this very huge sort of like covered outdoor seating area, which I wanted it to have the same like sort of outdoor lighting that it had as if it didn't have a roof. So the way I sort of like worked around that was by removing one sort of like wall piece and just sort of like replacing that with the lines objects, which I feel like was quite a creative way to sort of like create a fake wall while also utilizing the outdoor lighting, if that makes sense. But yeah, and we also utilize quite a lot of Horse Ranch expansion pack windows throughout the entire home, mainly because I just really like that wooden sort of frame that it has on most of the sort of like boxy windows that it comes with, which I feel like works really well. And we also utilize a lot of these, I believe they came from the Moschino or City Living, the curved sort of crossed sort of windows, which I really do like using. And since the walls were like quite wide for the diagonals, I actually only had to place a 1x1 sort of like boxed room just to create a fireplace, which I feel like worked out pretty well. And as you can see throughout like the entire video, I sort of like jumped from doing the garden back to like also adding some extra stuff to like the house, like such as like windows or like extra decorations, mainly because this house was just so huge and you literally sometimes forget what part you're focusing on, then you just like go on something else, and then you go back and forth and just like jump between like areas and stuff like that that you want to work on. But yeah, anytime I just sort of like saw something that looked a bit blank or like not empty, I just go back to it later on, and then it just sort of like worked out. But yeah, I did try to sort of like get rid of all of the exterior and sort of like garden area first before focusing on like carrying on with the rest of the home, if that makes sense. And here we're just adding some solar panels and stuff like that onto the top of the sort of like flat roofed areas of this entire house, mainly because I just wanted to feel a bit more like realistic and detailed. So I just added that small little detail, which I feel like worked out pretty well. And we also have a very nice sort of like outdoor sort of like pathway that leads throughout the entire home, which I believe I did mention a few minutes ago, but I just turned out great, especially with that sort of like rocky sort of like pebble texture that we have going on throughout the entire sort of like front area of the catwalk, which I really enjoyed using. And this is the moss balls that I was mentioning earlier, which I feel like worked really well by placing those into those sort of half wall sort of areas, which I sort of like faked as like column corners for each of like the fencing pieces, which I feel like turned out pretty good. But moving on to the actual sort of like seating area that was covered up by the roof, we sort of just have like a very nice sort of like family outdoor dinner area, and I tried to fake a furnace or like fireplace that sort of like was on either side of the room or like sort of closed area by placing on both sides of the wall, which I feel like turned out really well. And we just have like a nice small like little seating area outdoors under the roof. But moving on to the interior, we have this very nice grand entrance on the diagonal, and I wanted like a very nice like table central unit which didn't have any like sort of seating on it. So the way I managed to do that was by dividing that really big room into like 3 different rooms, which I feel like turned out a lot better, and it was more centered with the main sort of like front entrance area, as well as like the stairway that led up to the 2nd floor, which I feel like turned out great. And we're actually utilizing the eco lifestyle sort of wooden paneling for the flooring, which I feel like turned out really nice. But we also do utilize different sort of colors of it throughout the entire home, such as like the hallways and whatnot, and sort of like the entryways, just to like differentiate the house a little bit more, especially because we have such a huge mansion to work with. And I actually skipped the main sort of like seating area that we see towards like the right and left wing of the home, but you will also be able to see all of that in the tour that I have provided for you guys towards the end of the video. So I highly recommend you guys to check out the tour towards the end of the video. So just so you guys can see pretty much every single entire room that this build has to offer, as well as like the exterior. But at the moment, we're just sort of focusing on creating the very grand and luxurious looking sort of office area that we have in this build, which is sort of like utilizing a lot of these like dark wood textures that we have going on throughout this entire room. And I don't really utilize a lot of this dark wood texture, mainly because it's not really my style, but I just wanted to explore and incorporate something unique for you guys in this build, which I feel like turned out really great. And the original home does also have an office that looks pretty similar to that, with really rich, even though it wasn't my style, I just feel like it did look really interesting. But moving on to the kitchen, we have a very nice all white kitchen by using the cottage living sort of expansion pack kitchen counters, and I just really liked the way they looked. And I just used this base game sort of wall counters to sort of like match it with, and I just feel like it did actually turn out pretty well. And I feel like this kitchen definitely does remind me of a more traditional style, mainly because of that sort of like wooden texture we have going on throughout it. But I just feel like it also does feel a lot more homey rather than using something that looks very modern and simplistic. So yeah, I just really enjoy creating a unique kitchen for once, rather than utilizing the same sort of like style that I've always been going for. And I wanted to keep it a little bit monochrome, mainly because I just really like the clean style of it. But we do also have a very dark and wooden sort of like center sort of island counterpiece, and we do actually have two different island counters, which I feel like worked really well with this build, especially because with the amount of space that we have to work with in this kitchen, I just felt like it really felt necessary. And I sort of wanted to stay true to the original house that I was sort of like kind of recreating, so I did want to keep some of the uniqueness that it actually had, such as this double island counter sort of situation. And I have also utilized a certain area of the kitchen to be like some sort of like coffee station area, because I just felt like it kind of made sense for a very luxurious home like this. And I kind of enjoy creating a lot of those in my really huge houses, if you have seen my previous builds, because I don't know, I just feel like it's a pretty unique way of like utilizing and stylizing and showcasing a very huge and grand coffee machine like that. And I just feel like it kind of like makes sense in my mind, to be honest. But yeah, moving on to the living area, we kind of have a similar living area that we have pretty much on the other side of this wall, which is sort of like on the garden area of it. And I just really like the way it actually turned out. It just felt a bit cozy and homey, and I tried to add some color into this living room in particular just by like utilizing certain sort of like couches that had different colored sort of pillows on it. So eventually we do end up changing one of them into the book nook kit sort of sofa, because I just personally like the colors that came on the pillow, and it just kind of like has these muted colors that I kind of prefer utilizing in my builds. And I really do like this square rug that I have utilized quite often throughout this entire build, mainly because I just like the muted colors that is on it, such as like this really like light blue, but also like this sort of very muted orangey sort of color, which I feel like does tie in pretty well with the rest of the objects that I have selected for this particular sort of like living space. And I also sized down one of those very huge base game TVs, mainly because I just like how flat and like clear it looks in comparison to like a curved TV or whatnot. And we do also utilize a very nice sort of dining area for this side of the room, which I feel like is really nice. And I feel like I have spaced out pretty much every single part of this sort of living space pretty well by sort of like assigning each corner or each side of the room to like serve a particular purpose, if that makes sense. And we do also have quite a few sort of like bathrooms and laundry rooms and whatnot here and there throughout the entire build that I don't show every single bathroom, because I just feel like it'll be a little bit too time consuming. I just feel like it wouldn't be that interesting to see so many bathrooms being recreated, because they most likely look all the same, if that makes sense. But yeah, we have this sort of like renovated sort of garage area, which I tried to add some sort of like tool shed looking counter units and sort of like added some extra clutter on it later on in the video, which I feel like did make it feel a bit more like sort of like unused, if that makes sense. But I did also try to make it functional by adding some gym equipment in there, which I feel like sort of like makes sense to like make it some sort of renovated room. And we do also have this very nice sort of laundry sort of area, which I had the opportunity to utilize, mainly because we just had quite a lot of space in this room and in this house in particular. So I just felt like it kind of made sense to incorporate some small sort of like functional areas here and there. But I just feel like this room can definitely be turned into something else really quickly, and yeah, just like pretty much whatever you guys want to change it to. But yeah, moving on to the second floor, we actually have the master bedroom, and I tried to keep it simple and unique, and I tried to incorporate my favorite styles into this particular room, mainly because I just like creating a detailed and interesting looking master bedroom. So we actually utilize this very fancy looking double bedroom, and especially like these very nice colors that it came with it. So we're kind of like focusing on these like muted but also like simple colors. So we have like a nice gray and gold accents, as well as like these very nice sort of like brown colored accents and white colored objects that we have going throughout the entire build, which I feel like look really nice. And I just feel like this particular master bedroom just looks really grand and feels really sort of expensive in my opinion, and I just feel like it really turned out pretty well. And they do also have their own sort of like private sort of balcony area which they can enjoy, and we do also have a relatively small bathroom for the master bedroom, which I do actually show in the build because I just feel like it's kind of like it kind of makes sense for the master bedroom. And we do also have like a his and her sort of sink area, but we do also have a extra room that connects to the bathroom, which they can go towards their own walk-in closet sort of area, which I feel like is quite unique. And I do really like creating these in most of my modern sort of like mansions, because I just feel like it kind of like makes sense, to be honest, to have a walk-in closet in these huge houses. And we do also have a very nice sort of like nursery area off to the side of the master bedroom, which I really did actually enjoy building. I didn't use most of the, I believe it's called the Storybook Nursery kit, but I didn't utilize a lot of the objects that came in it, mainly because I just felt like it wasn't really my style, and I didn't really want it to be like, to seem very like gothic or like very sort of like expensive or luxurious. I kind of just wanted to keep it like a general color style and theme. So instead I sort of just like utilized the growing together sort of like stuff that came with that in terms of like for the kids area and room. And I do also utilize a lot of these sconces that do come from that expansion pack as well, mainly because I just really like the way it looks. It's kind of like traditional, but it also kind of like reminds me of it being like really modern and fancy in my opinion. But yeah, this is one of the other rooms that we have on the diagonal, and we do actually have two bedrooms that sort of like are on like the same side of the room, which I feel like looked really nice. And I just really am happy with how these sort of like bedrooms turned out, and I just kind of like imagine these to be some sort of like teenager's room who is interested in art. And as I just added like some sort of easel there, and I also added like their own sort of like desk onto the side, which sort of like looks out to the window, which I feel like looks really nice. And we actually have another bedroom on the other side of this actual bedroom, which is the exact same shape and sort of like layout, which is just like in between like the spare room that we have in the middle, which is actually the bathroom. And initially we're actually going to go for an ensuite sort of situation, which was sort of like a Jack and Jill sort of situation, but then I actually just ended up making it a general public bathroom for the second floor, mainly because it just wasn't really working out as like a Jack and Jill, and I just felt like it made a lot more sense to just make it a general second floor bathroom. But we sort of just like replicated some sort of like similar design with having a very nice like desk that looks out towards the window, but we have completely different objects for like the same thing, such as like a different bed and bedside tables, as well as like different activities and whatnot. So this one primarily focuses on playing the guitar, whereas the other one is more like an artist in my eyes. And then we also move on to the final bedroom, which is a more of like a darker sort of grungy sort of color scheme, where we focus on a more sort of like dark sort of like mustard orange sort of color, which incorporates a lot of like a dirty sort of like white color, a black color, as well as like a few sort of like dark blue colors scattered throughout the entire build, which I feel like is quite an interesting bedroom in my opinion. And I just feel like it turned out pretty well. And this bathroom is actually just off to the side of the second floor, and it kind of has like its own ensuite that sort of like looks out into the actual like garden area. And then we also go throughout like the entire home, just adding extra living spaces and sort of seating and decorations throughout the entire home, as well as for the exterior, just like adding extra foliage and trees here and there just to make it feel a bit more lived in and realistic. But yeah, that seems to be pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing. And also let me know what you think about this build in the comment sections below. I would love to know your thoughts and suggestions. And I also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are willing to check it out. And yeah, thank you very much again for 2,000 subscribers. And I'll see you guys in my next video.